what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, June 19th, 2018. Starting to get into the week here, and boy, there's a lot going on today. We've got a lot to talk about. I got plenty of talking points here, and let's get on into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. Now, I've been getting a lot of emails from people saying that I really should start thinking about having more guests on the show, and you're absolutely right. And I'm just going to have to carve out the time to act as a show booker, but we do have two who are coming on next week, next Wednesday. Don Wiskin from Extendivite will be joining us again about his wonderful product. And on Thursday, Kenneth Amaduri will be joining us to talk about where artificial intelligence may be going. So we're going to start getting some guests on the show here, which means I can kick back and be lazy in hour number 3 of the program, just like on Friday when Claire is here. Anyway, let's get on into it. The hearings into the Inspector General's report cranked up again today, and they are getting rancorous. Trey Gowdy came on out and just scorched former FBI Director James Comey in this absolutely blistering opening statement. And at this point, it's obvious James Comey is going to be the sacrificial lamb. In order to protect the deep state behind him, Comey's the one who's going to go down. Not go to jail, but his career is pretty much going to be over inside the government. Meanwhile, Representative Elijah Cummings is coming back the other way, saying, I don't know why we're here. I mean, the investigation is over. Hillary was cleared of any wrongdoing, which is not true. She was not actually technically a subject of the FBI's investigation into the email server. The FBI and Department of Justice investigated the server, but not Hillary herself, which is kind of like investigating a gun, but not the person who pulled the trigger. Just to tell you where that's going. But Elijah Cummings was out there and tried to hijack the hearings to go into this whole situation about the separation of families down on the border, which tells us that the reason that this policy, which started under Obama, is all of a sudden a big controversy is the Democrats are desperate to distract from the IG report because they know it's looking really, really bad. So everybody's out there trying to score points. Another issue that came on up, as you know, one of the revelations of the IG report were that there were additional FBI agents, pardon me, who received all kinds of gifts from members of the corporate media in exchange for bits and pieces of information. And the IG report does not name these FBI agents, but now the members of these committees are saying they want to know who these agents are, because obviously it's a very serious situation when they're leaking this kind of information in exchange for tickets and meals and who knows what all else they got. But basically, there's an article over in sarahcarter.com talking about the display of a two-tiered justice system in the FBI, Clinton, Trump investigations. And basically saying that had Horowitz not discovered the anti-Trump text between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, they would still be investigating the Trump campaign. That's where the deep state wanted the focus. Trump, 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 Trump. Forget about the Clinton Foundation. Forget about the email server. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtains. He's just there to send some poison keyboard texts. But there's a clear breakdown both at the FBI and the Department of Justice in the culture, the integrity, the system. And that is a serious, serious matter. Now, Horowitz has come on out and said that they've discovered there were 2 more agents and 1 attorney for whom they documented anti-Trump bias, and 2 of them may have worked on the Russia investigation or the Mueller investigations. Now, remember, when Mueller pulled together his team, they were all Democrats. They were all Clinton donors. There was absolutely no balance to maintain objectivity. Clearly, this was biased. This was a hatchet job from day one. And let's not forget the real takeaway from all of this, there has yet to be a proper investigation into Hillary's email server and into Hillary Clinton herself and how she used it and what she did with it. And that's what the American people need to be demanding right now. Clearly, there is something horrible being covered up here. We need to know what it is. I think I know what it is, obviously, but democracy can't survive with this much secrecy in government. It just doesn't work here. Now, something else that's come on out from the IG report is apparently during the 2016 campaign, a Clinton operative, Amanda Renteria, and Attorney General Loretta Lynch exchanged, quote, highly classified material, end quote, with each other in 2016. Whatever it is so secret that Michael Horowitz refused to talk about it during the Senate hearing. And said they would have to have a closed session or he'd get back to them. Now, the Amanda Renteria, or Renteria, I think it is, worked for U.S. Senators Dianne Feinstein and Debbie Stabenow, and she was hired as the Hillary campaign's Hispanic woman position on the campaign, token Hispanic. But apparently something was going on between her and Attorney General Loretta Lynch involving highly classified documents of apparently a tremendously sensitive nature. Now, somebody did a flashback here reminding us all that Attorney General Loretta Lynch assured Amanda Renteria that she, meaning Loretta Lynch, would not let the FBI agents go too far in probing the former Secretary of State. Again, there's a cover-up there. And we probably ought to get the truth out. We're not getting it from the IG report. We're getting some of it. It's a limited hangout. They're admitting to some little crimes in order to basically say it's over, we don't need to look any further before they get to the really big crimes. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to take a phone call from Andy in Texas. Aloha, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hey, Mike, we're just idiots. You and I are monkeys in a cage. These people are doing what the hell they want to do. They're playing their game. They're doing what they want to do. This IG report is about as stupid. I mean, it's just more paint on the wall. It's the second coat of the paint on the wall. It's like frosting on a cake. Nobody's getting in trouble here. We're in a really, really big problem here where these people, they think that they're above the law, and evidently they are. We can't convict
Andy, I hate to interrupt your fire hose of pessimism here, but every tyrant thinks they're above the law until they're told they're not above the law, such as Charles I or Louis XVI or Ceausescu. And I'm not recommending that course of action in this country, but there comes a time where their immunity, if you will, starts to run on out. Now, the value of the IG report and the hearings is not necessarily to get somebody thrown in jail, because you're right, they protect each other. They won't eat their own. If anybody goes to jail, it's going to be some lower down, throwaway minor clerk that they caught on some procedural error. They're probably going to put Manafort in jail. But the real value of this is that the American people are learning the true nature of this government. And as they listen to these hearings and they read all of this, they're coming to understand there is in fact a big secret behind the IG report, that it is a limited hangout. And they're going to start wondering what the heck has been going on. And of course, in the absence of any actual honest admissions by the government, we can let our imaginations run totally wild. And I've seen some pretty wild speculations out there about what's going on in the bowels of power, you know, with this John Podesta and Hillary Clinton and the rest of it. So I'm sorry you're not enthusiastic about what's going on, but I have to respectfully disagree with you. I think we're making progress as long as you remember, the goal is to educate the public to the true nature of what our politicians are really like, to basically tear down that very carefully maintained illusion of integrity and honor and honesty that is cultivated by the politicians. And that's shredding. I mean, the polls are showing it. U.S. trust and confidence in the government is at an all-time low.
Well, absolutely. No, but I mean, just look at the 9/11 report and how we were all pushed to accept that. And most of us never even heard the 9/11 report. And now we're looking at this. I mean, this is a woman. I mean, this woman, this creature that we call Hillary Clinton, this woman should be brought to task. She should be thrown under the bus. And we still have to just continually go on day and day without this woman being prosecuted. And we know, those of us who know, and there's millions of us that know,
yes,
that this woman has done some terrible things to our nation. And to
so
see
did her
them
husband.
brush it under the table again with the IG report. Yeah, her husband is a rapist, a child molester. Let's go on the Lolita and whatever.
Well, let's go back further than that. Bill Clinton held the door open while the CIA flooded this country with tons of cocaine, and who knows how many young lives were ruined by that.
But don't take away George Herbert Walker Bush's part of that. Because
yes, he was part of that as well.
Head of the CIA who brought this stuff in.
Yep.
I mean, so we've got all of this criminal networks going on, Mike. We got all of this stuff going on, and nobody can touch it. Nobody wants to touch it. Nobody can touch it because everybody's blackmailed. And we're just sitting here. We have to just sit here and wait. Hopefully, I watch the news daily, listen to people like yourself. Hopefully, there's something great is going to come out. No, it's not. They're going to cover it up. It's all going to get covered. There's no prosecution of Hillary. There's no prosecution of Bill. There's no prosecution of the Bushes. There's no end to this 9/11 thing. There's nothing. They're going to cover it up. They're going to continue to cover it up because they can.
Well, Andy, you need to pull back a little bit. What do you mean there's no end to 9/11? We know it was a false flag. End of story. Yeah, because the American people are no longer allowing the U.S. government to decide for them what is true and what is not. And the same thing is true for the current IG report. We know what's been going on in the back rooms, and we have a pretty good idea what Hillary Clinton was doing with that email server. We got a really good idea what she was doing with that so-called charitable foundation. And the government can go on denying and covering up, but all they're doing is continuing to undermine their credibility, which, as I said before, is at an all-time record low. And these hearings aren't really going to help the image of the federal government or the FBI or the Department of Justice, because when they come on out and they say, well, it was just this one time the FBI acted like this. No, of course not. Anybody who's my age remembers COINTELPRO and how the FBI really acts and what they really do. Anyway, Andy, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Well, when I first started reading about the Horowitz report, for some reason I haven't heard. The premise was originally, I thought, the premise was, why was she using an outside government server, the privatized server for government use? And that was the premise of the whole investigation. And I have yet to hear anybody say, well, that makes sense to me. Why was she using a private server with no oversight of government at all, which spells out, corruption, something that was illegal.
Well,
and,
let's
that should be talked about.
Okay, the government actually does allow officials to use outside email for unclassified business as long as those emails are eventually sent to their inside the government server's email account. It's a little bit of a loophole there. I think Obama actually tightened that up a little bit. The issue is the presence of classified information outside the classified systems. But as Horowitz is telling us now, the FBI and the Department of Justice investigations never asked that question. Why were you doing this? Probably because they didn't want the answer. And they literally, what the investigation was, it was very narrow. Unlike Robert Mueller, who's just all over the place trying to find anything he can, the FBI and Department of Justice investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server focused on the server and what information may have gone through it and whether any of it was classified. And Hillary Clinton herself pointedly was not a subject of the investigation. Old Chinese proverb, never ask a question to which you do not want the answer.
That's true. Last but least, if they're saying they don't know what actually went on with the server and everything and what was on the server, that would be an absolute lie, because we know the NSA has records and of everything that's being done on the net. So there is a trail to Hillary Clinton, which tells me if the NSA doesn't want to divulge what they really know on all the illegalities of this whole using a private server with government information on it, they're part of that deep state also then. The NSA is part of the deep state.
Oh, there's no question about that, but don't forget when this investigation first started up, the NSA apparently, reportedly contacted then Director of the FBI, James Comey, and said, we've got all the emails, including everything that she deleted, and we're ready to send them over. And James Comey said, I'm not interested. And we're hearing from this IG report very clearly the decision to protect and exonerate, well, not exonerate, but to protect Hillary Clinton from prosecution was made before the investigation really got underway. You had Comey himself drafting a memo before the key witnesses we were interviewed, including Hillary herself. You've got Loretta Lynch reassuring this Amanda that she would restrain the FBI from investigating too deeply. So, yeah, the fix was in right from the beginning, and that's what the American people need to come to understand and deal with. This is as big a scandal as Watergate. It's as big as Iran-Contra, and if we're all out there talking about it, it will get heard. We know the corporate media, we know the Democrats are trying to make this all go away. But remember back when the Downing Street memo first came out and admitted that the anti-Iraq propaganda was fixed around an already existing policy of going to war, and the corporate media tried to pretend it didn't exist for a month. But the online community, we talked it up so much and we sent it around so much that finally the corporate media had to report on it honestly, or else be seen as clearly covering this up.
No, I agree. Hey, last thing I want to mention real quick here is I sent you an email this morning about Julian Assange. I'm not sure if his health is failing. You know, he probably is because he's been cooped up there forever, but trading his asylum in for health care, it looks like. But I kind of wonder if Julian Assange is going to go down and have the same fate as Yasser Arafat, and they finally just poison him. I wouldn't be surprised that they can't get their hands on him, but he's got to eat. And sooner or later, we may hear of Julian Assange being found dead, poisoned. Of course, they'll say it was something else but we know the United States has already said, politicians have said they need to send an attack team, an assassin team to get this guy and get him out. So they would love him dead. They'd love him on trial, but of course their kangaroo court trial. But I think they want him dead too. So I would not be surprised he may have the same fate as Yasser Arafat.
Well, he may, but he's been cut off from WikiLeaks for so long that his death, while to be regretted, wouldn't stop WikiLeaks one tiny bit. That's just the absolute hard reality. And WikiLeaks is spread out all over the globe, and they can't, they can't shut it down. They can shut maybe one part down and go after the other. What I want to know is where the heck is Australia in all of this? Because technically Assange is still a citizen of Australia and entitled to Australian diplomatic intervention. But again, 6 years in that embassy, it really is too much.
Don't you think it's a possibility?
And we know from Cuba how the U.S. government loves to carry a grudge.
Yeah. Don't you think it's a possibility, Mike, that someone would label WikiLeaks a terrorist organization to shut the money down, and of course you couldn't, donate money to a terrorist organization. Try that route of cutting off the money to WikiLeaks.
All right, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after this commercial break. I want to respond to that. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're still talking with Steve Elkins. And Steve, interestingly enough, back in 2010, there was a push to have WikiLeaks declared a foreign terrorist organization. It was spearheaded by Representative Peter King when he came on in as chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee. And the media all picked it up and said, oh, yes, WikiLeaks is definitely a terrorist organization, which is really kind of weird when you think back to when WikiLeaks first got started and how the corporate media just lionized them. Oh, this was wonderful. This was going to be great. We're going to have all this stuff. And then look how fast they turned. But yeah, that's already been floated to call WikiLeaks a foreign terrorist organization in order to put them on sanctions lists and try and starve them of money.
Well, yeah, that's how you kill an entity like that. You starve them of money, and they usually they fold. But you know, they've even gone as far as the United States to label the Revolutionary Guard of the Iran Army, the Iranian Army, as a terrorist organization. It's simply their military. So that's the route I think they will take if they haven't already. But I did hear the same talk also to label it a terrorist organization or whatever. But I don't know. I kind of think I hope I'm wrong. I hope Julian Assange lives to see the trials and the corruption unfold and something ever happen, or everything he's ever done was for nothing. But I mean, they attacked the whistleblower. This is amazing. Instead of their actions themselves, I mean, what he did report on was the absolute truth, the atrocities in war, the killing of journalists, civilian people, and they go after the whistleblower for telling the truth. This is amazing that this is happening.
That shows you how corrupt our society has become. We're seeing the same thing coming out of Israel. They want to go on being vile, evil people. They just don't want anybody to be able to talk about it. And we're seeing the same mindset emerge within our own government, where our government wants to make war, our politicians want to be corrupt, and they just want to have fun doing what they're doing, and they're just trying to not let the public know what's going on. We don't have an open and transparent government. We haven't had in decades now, probably going all the way back to the Kennedy assassination.
I agree. That's it, Mike. Hey, thanks. Great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now then, getting into the war zones. As you know, Israel has attacked Syria again. Normally, they will attack around Golan or Homs. This time, they really reached deep into Syria and attacked an area up on the Syria-Iraq border. Their justification being there was Hezbollah there. Nobody knows whether there really was or not. And then they got on out of there. The question is, were the Israeli attacking aircraft and drones detected on Syrian and Russian radar? And if so, is Russia and Syria just trying to sit quiet, accept the damage, rather than be goaded into a confrontation with Israel, which would mean a confrontation with the United States? So once again, Putin is very carefully trying to play peacemaker, and he is a chess master, and he understands sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece to win the eventual game here. Now, the State Department is revealing details of phone talks between Mike Pompeo and Sergei Lavrov on Syria. So this is probably preparatory to Trump's meeting with Putin in July, where I'm sure that what Mike Pompeo is saying is Russia's get out, and I'm sure what Lavrov is saying, we're here by invitation and permission of the government, and you are not. So I don't know how far this is going to go, but apparently they're talking about a ceasefire in Syria in that southwest region. The problem is, of course, as long as Israel continues to attack that same area, it really doesn't accomplish much of anything. The wild card, again, once again, is Israel, that is operating outside of any kind of control. So Syria's armies, military columns, and Russian forces enter Daraz province for imminent anti-terrorism operation. So they're moving forward, and apparently the Army's Tiger Force went into the region. They sent in envoys trying to tell the terrorists, the terrorists, you can leave. Just put down your weapons and leave. But apparently a number of peace committees in Daraa province were killed by the terrorists who rejected the Army's reconciliation plan. So that's going to get really, really ugly. Things are also getting very ugly down in Yemen. And Yemen's Navy has succeeded in capturing a French vessel laden with foreign mercenaries. The motor yacht Jehol 2 off the coast of Hodeida on Saturday, and they gave no further details. More about Yemen when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting back into the news, we're talking about what's going on down in Yemen, and Yemen scored a victory by capturing this French vessel loaded with these foreign mercenaries. I don't know if this is the same one that was hit with the missile fire, which another report said had sunk. But they're putting up a good fight. Unfortunately, they're losing. And apparently, Saudi Arabia has bombed the Hodeida airport. They're now in control of it. And at this point, they're starting to issue an ultimatum that the Houthi surrender immediately, or the Saudis are just going to start killing everybody in Hodeida. Men, women, children, cats, dogs, goldfish. Now, of course, in the corporate media, the Houthi are always described as rebels. They're not. They are the government of Yemen. They're just not the government of Yemen the U.S. approves of. Therefore, they are rebels. But that could turn into yet another major humanitarian disaster. It's already a humanitarian disaster. Saudi Arabia is following a policy of scorched earth. Everything destroyed, no food, no water, everybody starving to death. Cholera completely out of control. Oh, and oops, sorry, we bombed the cholera treatment center. Our bad. Israel warplanes have bombed Gaza yet again. They're saying that it's in response to the protesters flying burning kites, which are being lofted into the air and released to try and set fire to Israeli farmlands, which is obviously something they're rather reckless to do. Maybe these are Israeli agent provocateurs doing it so that Israel can go on bombing and killing, because Israel lives by the false flag. Remember the motto of the Mossad: by way of deception, thou shalt do war. And Israel has been caught before faking attacks against itself to justify aggression. Those people living in Gaza, I mean, it's a giant open-air prison. They're being kept on a starvation diet, and now they're simply being used as a shooting gallery by the snipers. The Red Cross has finally stepped on in and said that Israel's use of live fire in Gaza is triggering an unprecedented crisis, and that is certainly true. The hospitals in Gaza are completely overwhelmed. They're out of supplies, and they really can't treat the wounds coming from these butterfly bullets. And Israel will not allow the people who've been shot with these butterfly bullets to go over to the better hospitals in the West Bank. And so the only solution the hospitals in Gaza have is amputation. They're creating a generation of disabled. Meanwhile, the army has opened fire on shepherds in Gaza. Now, these shepherds were hundreds of meters away from the border fence. They were nowhere near the fence. And the soldiers are still shooting at them. And the soldiers said, well, they turned toward the fence. Well, if you're inside a cage, no matter which way you're walking, you're going to be facing the bars. And these are shepherds. They got to go where the sheep are going. But the idea, this idea that somebody is a threat to Israel just by being close to the border, and in this case we're talking hundreds of meters, it's ridiculous. They're just out there on a killing rampage. Now, up in the European Union, they're funding a project to prosecute Israel Defense Forces officers for committing violations against the Palestinian civilians, according to Israel Hayom, which quotes a local human rights organization. Now, the pro-Israel group NGO Monitor says that the funding and performance of non-governmental organizations which keep an eye on violations committed by the IDF. So there are organizations out there that are trying to find a way to move forward. The issue is having standing in court. Now, obviously, Palestine, Hamas specifically, is up at the International Criminal Court trying to file war crimes charges against the Israeli leadership that has ordered this barbaric treatment. Israel is now up there trying to say that Palestine doesn't really meet the legal definition of a state in order to basically deny them standing. But some of these other human rights organizations, they do have standing, and they cannot be stopped from filing charges at the ICC. Like I said, Israel stepped over a very bloody line with that Monday massacre. It's like the Amritsar massacre over there in India. Israel is still trying to figure out a way to justify to the world it's just shooting the Palestinians, and it's gone back to the idea that all those Palestinians were there to act as human shields, and therefore that makes it okay to shoot them. They're thrashing around. Israel's got a public relations nightmare on their hands. They can't find anything that's going to get traction. The eyes of the world are open, and they're looking what Israel is doing in Gaza. They're looking at what Israel is doing in the West Bank, and no amount of public relations or advertising or corporate media spin is going to change that. So apparently there's yet another village in the occupied West Bank, and an Israeli high court has just authorized the demolition of the entire village anytime the government sees fit. And it's another one of these Bedouin villages, and Israel wants to relocate the Bedouin village to a location near the garbage dump adjacent to Abu Dis in the vicinity of Jerusalem. And this would ignore warnings by rights groups that this sort of forcible transfer amounts to a war crime. And of course, Israel's response is war crime, schmore crime. So, Israel's out of control. They do believe they're above the law, and they're above international law. Kennedy was right. They should have never been allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, liberals are out there worrying about whether Israel, rented lips, will be able to remain a Jewish and democratic state if it retains control of occupied Palestinian lands. And it shows just how disconnected liberals are from the real world, because Israel is not now a democratic state. It's never tried to be one. The very fact that it is a Jewish state, self-described Jewish state, and holds all non-Jews as second-class citizens tells you it's not a democracy. It's a theocracy, is what it is. Now, as you know, there is a new Freedom Flotilla on its way to Gaza, and it's making its way down from down from where they set up. I think it was Norway. Interestingly enough, police in France have prevented 2 boats from this flotilla from docking at the Seine River, despite subjecting the vessels to extensive searches in advance. The police went on board. They were looking for any kind of contraband like weapons or ammunition or explosives or anything that could be considered hostile and a threat to Israel. They found nothing, because every time these flotillas sail down there, it's food, it's medicine, it's coloring books for the kids, things like that. And I'm pretty sure most of it's medicine right now, because the hospitals in Gaza are running out. And even though they found nothing, the police said, you can't dock here. And one of the spokesmen for the Freedom Flotilla said that they were rather surprised that Israeli territorial waters now begin in Paris. He was being sarcastic. It shows how even Emmanuel Macron is under the thumb of Israel. Anyway, Trump went ahead and has withdrawn the United States from the United Nations Human Rights Council as of today because of the Human Rights Council's bias against Israel. Oh, they're biased against Israel. Oh, every time Israel shoots a Palestinian, the Human Rights Council said that's a human rights violation. I mean, the bias is just obvious there. Bias, 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 bias. It's so unfair to Israel. And obviously, the world is looking at what's going on, and we'll see this as a further diminishment of the United States as any kind of a moral leader. Because, like Emmanuel Macron, Trump just made it very obvious. He, too, is under the thumb of Israel. We're under foreign puppet rule. Okay, now here's a very bizarre story. This came out of 12160. And apparently the United States has been pushing the Gulf states to invest in economic projects for Gaza to be built in Egypt's northern Sinai. Now, apparently the three sources came on out, said that the proposed Gulf-funded projects are aimed at generating momentum before the unveiling of a U.S. peace plan. Well, if you look at the map of where the Gaza Strip is relative to the Sinai, it looks to me like Trump's peace plan is going to be to basically convince Egypt to allow the Gazans to relocate in the northern Sinai, and they want to have an existing infrastructure up and running for them, and then Gaza goes back to being part of Israel. Now, that won't stop Israel from lusting after Sinai, because they've already invaded it once. But that's an interesting development. If that's what Trump is thinking, might actually work. The U.S. Senate has now blocked the sale of the F-35 fighter jets to Ankara out of concern that Turkey is planning to buy the Russian S-400 air defense missile system. And they may have just done Turkey a favor, given how expensive the aircraft is and how poorly it seems to be performing. It's not even combat ready yet. The only F-35s in flight right now are just for training. So the whole deal looks like it's off. The senators voted to kill that deal. And Turkey had been planning on buying 100 of those, but now that deal is off. The head of NATO is coming on out and saying that NATO's getting fragile. And he's warning over the future of the transatlantic relationship. First of all, with the growing divides among the European nations and the strain between some of those nations like France and Germany with the United States. And he's pointing the finger at Donald Trump for being a little too nationalistic and forgetting that NATO is supposed to be a collection of nations engaged in mutual defense, except it hasn't really had that role for quite a long time. It's become an attack dog. A little bit of good news over in Korea. The United States and South Korea have now officially canceled the major war game that was planned for August. So that part is backing on down. And now the Pentagon and Defense Department have received their orders, and they're moving forward on that. North Korea has now offered to sweeten the deal to move the agreement forward by abandoning a key weapon. And it's not nuclear weapons, it's not chemical weapons, it's not biological weapons, and it's not the long-range missiles. Remember, North Korea has just thousands of massive artillery guns hidden in hardened shelters among the hills and mountains right along that demilitarized zone. And it was estimated that had war actually broken out between the Koreas, the artillery batteries could literally kill tens of thousands of people in Seoul every hour. And so Kim Jong-un is saying, you know, it might be time to shut that part of it down. I know where he's going with this and why he's not concerned about losing his weapons of deterrence. He and Moon Jae-in are rapidly moving toward reunification. In fact, the two Koreas have agreed to march together under a unified peninsula flag and form combined teams to compete in the next Asian Games. So that's where they're going. Now, you know the United States is going to try and find some way to wreck that. The U.S. doesn't want the Koreas reunified. But that's where Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in are going. And that removal of the artillery, that was a message more to South Korea than it was to the United States. Kim Jong-un is back up in Beijing for a 2-day visit. It's all hush-hush. Nobody knows what's being discussed. But this is, I think, his third meeting up there in Beijing so far this year. A lot of stuff going on here. Now, South Korea is holding their own war games to defend against what they call island attack. And this apparently has caused Japan a great deal of upset because a long history of enmity between Korea and Japan. If you study the history, it goes back a very, very long way. And so South Korea is now wargaming, and Japan is seeing it as a provocation here. Down in Colombia, they just had their elections, and the far right wins the presidency. It's being described as a frightening result. And this article is painting it all as negative, saying that it's going to take Colombia back to civil war and internal repression with the help of the U.S. and other conservative governments. So we're mucking about down in Colombia as well. Do you realize how much strife around the globe is a direct result of the U.S. going into other people's countries and just messing around with their governments, imposing dictators, secret police, death squads? Horrible thing. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking about the wars, and I remember when I was young, which was a long time ago, sadly, the Republicans were considered the party of war, and the Democrats were considered the party of peace. Those days seem to be gone because back when the defense bill was passed, $716 billion defense bill, which included $21 billion for nuclear weapons development, 38 Democrats voted with the Republicans to spend all of this money on endless war and empire, while millions of American citizens are lacking food, housing, and health care. We're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's exactly what a wartime economy is. Everything goes to the war. Everything goes to the war. People are starving, too bad, there's a war on. Infrastructure falling apart, too bad, there's a war on. Now, as you know, Donald Trump came on out with an announcement that he wants to develop a space force. He wants to project U.S. military might into outer space. And he says this is going to be the 6th branch of the military, which was a surprise to me. I thought it would be the 5th, because I'm familiar with 4: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. I don't know what he thinks the 5th one is that he skips over to get to the Space Force, but that's another matter entirely. And Moscow, of course, has come on back, warning the United States against deploying weapons of mass destruction in space, and says that they would have to have a tough response. Now, as you know, the big concern is if a weapon of mass destruction is up there, it could come down entirely by accident. It could be hacked because it's up there in the sky, and anybody with a suitable satellite dish that can crack the codes could bring that thing down. But I'm opposed to war in outer space, and I've explained this before, because it could turn low Earth orbit into this shrapnel-filled minefield that would literally imprison us on our own planet for the next century before it all fell out of the sky. I mean, there's still stuff up there from the dawn of the space program. The Explorer 1, I think, is still up there. So if we start shooting each other's satellites, there's going to be all this debris flying around at right angles. It'll be a cascade. There'll be just this huge cloud of debris surrounding our planet. It will end commercial space flight. We're not even going to be able to get geosync satellites up there. There goes your MTV. This is a very, very reckless way to go. But unfortunately, when you have a war going, nobody's thinking long-term consequences. It's win now, and we don't care what happens down the road, which is why we've got all these drums full of leftover chemical weapons and ammunition just piled up all over the place, including right off our shore here. Okay, there's our music. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with hour number 2 after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and a listener just wrote on in to remind me that the 5th branch of the military is the Coast Guard. And yes, I overlooked that, but again, when I was young, I think of the branches of the military as people who go on out and kill other people or blow things up. And I grew up in an age where the Coast Guard was all about rescuing really idiotic boaters. So, yeah, that's our 5th branch and Trump's new Space Corps. Sounds like a cheap science fiction show from the 1950s. It's Space Corps. Insert ominous music here. It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. Trump is going to reignite the space race, and the only good that would come out of it would be the technological fallout, which could really stimulate our industry, our technology, our manufacturing. But you don't have to get confrontational with Russia and China to do that. Now, interesting little story has surfaced. Do you remember all the way back in 2015, there was this terror attack at the Bataclan Concert Hall in Paris? And a lot of people were wondering, how did these terrorists get these guns in France, which has got extremely tight gun control? And how were they able to get on in there and cause all this damage and all this bloodshed? It was very spectacular. It was, we've got to ban guns. We've got to have more security. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. Well, it turns out that a group of survivors and families of the victims have filed a lawsuit against the government of France because apparently there was an anti-terror unit stationed there the whole time. 8 soldiers from the Sentinel anti-terror patrol, armed with assault rifles, were outside the concert hall while the massacre was taking place, and they were told by the superiors, do not intervene. Shades of Parkland, as it were. Another story out of Zero Hedge. We're getting into a situation right now as more and more of Obama's faults as president are being dragged into the light. The latest corporate media spin is, well, yes, Obama lied, but really Trump lies much more than he does. So they're trying to do this thing about who lies more. And this article basically points out, well, if you really want to cast a wider net, it's the corporate media are the biggest liars of all. And they make both Obama and Trump look like choir boys in comparison. All right, we're going to take a phone call now from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I want to talk about the economy, but did you hear breaking news that supposedly Peter Strzok has been fired?
No, I hadn't heard that, but wasn't he supposed to testify before the Senate hearing?
Yeah, so I don't know what's going on. Mike, you know, the whole system's just got to come down. I mean, it's like, I never see, I mean, this has been going on for a long time, so we haven't seen it because we haven't been paying attention. You know, I mean, I know you have, but I mean, this has been going on a lot longer than we've been alive.
Yeah.
But with all the internet and the information coming, I mean, you see what's been going on for all these years. You know, it's disgraceful. I mean, these people are all garbage. You know, I mean, there ain't nothing good about any of these people. You know, they all got dirty laundry, you know, and they're all just dirty. I don't know.
Well, I'm looking at a web search here, and of course it includes when Strzok was fired from the Mueller probe, but all I can find is a story at Town Hall saying that, asking, is he about to be fired? It's not confirming yet that he has been fired, but of course the web is always a few minutes behind the corporate media, and I'm not seeing it on Fox, and obviously I can't follow the breaking news while I'm doing the radio show.
If there was like BNL, whatever site, so we'll just wait till, I guess, an hour or so, and we'll find out. Hey, Mike, with the economy, you had I don't remember his name, he called in, he listed all the names of all the businesses closing. I mean, the reason why they're all closing is because nobody's got any money to buy stuff. 2008 was it. We're a dead economy now. We're just basically on life support by them printing money out of thin air.
Well, they're not doing it for our benefit. I think what's going on is that the higher-ups, the money junkies, understand that we are headed toward a Soviet Union-style collapse, and what they're trying to do now, if they can't get a world war to stop it, then what they're going to do is plunder the wealth of the nation and put it in their pockets and then skedaddle for the borders as it all comes apart. In fact, we even have a coffee mug that we sell in our online store that says the last official act of any government is to loot the nation. And I think we're in the middle of that right now, whether they're looting it for their own pocket or they're looting it for the war economy. It doesn't really matter anymore.
It's probably loot the nations because it's the West in general. I mean, we all reach peak debt. You know, nobody can, I mean, how many credit cards can you have and max out? And then you put that debt on another credit card. You only can go on for so long, you know, AKA kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
But we're never going to, you know, I don't want to sound, you know, pessimistic, but we're not, America is not the same country we started as. We are a United States of Empire. There's two routes we could have took for our government, and we went down the empire route, and that was a bad choice.
Now, wait a minute.
You can't have both.
Dustin, we did not choose to go down the path of empire. The people running the government did.
I meant that.
Okay, yeah. Let's put the blame where the blame belongs.
Well, how about this? There's still a small percentage of people that are blamed, though, too. American people. A small percentage. There are more people woken up now. But, Mike, I don't think there's no way to fix this now. You know what I mean?
No, there never was. There never was. Under private central banking, you can never pay off the total aggregate debt. It is impossible. And the private central bankers use that debt to control the nation, to control the people, and to transfer the hard assets of the nation, meaning the land, the houses, the factories, everything, into their own pockets. And when it all comes crashing down, they're going to have all the physical assets of the nation. It's all going to be called privatization. They're going to have the bridges, the rail lines, the airports, and we, the American people, are going to be stuck with these piles and piles of paper with colored ink all over them. That's all we're going to be left for 200 years of labor building this country.
And Mike, I don't know how much time I left, but I watched YouTube videos of them galvanizing steel in like other countries, and there's hardly anybody working there. It's like all automated, and they're like, where are all these people going to go that work? Yeah, that did work. You know, like everything's going to be, you know, is becoming more, you know, automated. and there's not going to be a need for 20 people to work on automated machines. You'll need 1 or 2 or 3. Well,
Yep.
where's the seven? I feel sorry for the kids who went to college, Mike. The time you get out of college, what you went to college for is irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
The jobs are just not there. And as I've been saying repeatedly, it is a very short-sighted policy that's going to end in disaster. Because if ordinary people are not able to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, then the consumer economy will collapse. And that will bring with it manufacturing and distribution. And we're already starting to see it with all these retail closures. And yet the money junkies can't let go of this idea of squeezing another penny of profit out of their companies by firing their employees and replacing them with machines.
And I just want people to leave with this thought. 500 stores, 400 stores, times how many people? That's a lot of people.
Yes.
Not one person per store. It's multiple, 30, 50, 100, 200. I mean, thousands, it adds up. And we're in bad shape. I mean, the government's not going to tell you and the media's not going to tell you, but,
Nope.
You tell us, and a lot of the listeners who call in, like myself and others, who know what's going on. All right, thanks, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates. And I did just locate a tweet where apparently Peter Strzok was escorted out of the FBI building. No, wait a minute, that's back on Friday. So apparently he's been in human resources since he was dismissed from the Mueller team, but apparently he was escorted out of the FBI building last Friday, and we're just now getting word of that. Now, is this retaliation for his willingness to testify? I don't know, but it feels like things are getting very, very tense. And all I can tell you, Peter, stay out of Fort Marcy Park, stay out of small aircraft. Okay. Over at Samantha Bee's Full Frontal, they're struggling to regain advertisers after the attack on Ivanka Trump, and it was uncalled for and inappropriate. And it seems to be a trend among liberals now to just try and outdo each other for vileness and disrespect. And even obscenity within the limits of FCC controls on broadcasts. And you can't have a reasonable discussion that way. But then apparently liberals can't win the arguments on the facts and the logic. So it's just shout everybody else down, keep them silent so that only their side of the debate gets out there. But her attack on Ivanka Trump was wholly inappropriate. Just like, what's her name, Griffin, going after the First Lady over the immigration. Melania had a very calm, well-thought-out response to what was going on. Kathy Griffin just went on out with profanity. All right, let's talk about the economic news. It has been a bad day on the stock market. At one point, the Dow was down 400 points based on the fears of an escalating trade war. Let's see what it ended at. They got it back up to 287, but that's definitely not a good day on the Dow. So, the trade war fears are escalating. People don't know where this is going to end. And the stock markets are now in negative territory for the year and on track for the 6th straight decline. This keeps up, there's going to be a bit of a panic at that point. So Donald Trump threatened Monday to impose tariffs on an additional $200 billion worth of Chinese goods if Beijing follows through with its promise to retaliate against a previous round of U.S. tariffs. So now it's like a ping pong game. Tariff, 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 tariff. And that's got everybody nervous. And it's around the world, not just here in the U.S. The Shanghai plunged 3.2%. It's below 3,000 for the first time in 2 years. Story coming out of shtfplan.com, why America's trade war with China will be absolutely crippling for the U.S. economy. This is coming from Mike Snyder. And they're saying that Trump has basically fired a shot across the bow of China, and it could escalate out of control here. There have already been a couple of back and forths on this, just ramping this up to the point where trade between the U.S. and China could cease entirely. And right now, because we don't really have a lot of domestic manufacturing, we need their products more than they need ours. Here are the 6 ways China could retaliate in a trade war with the U.S. China could de-escalate tensions by presenting a list of actions it will follow to reduce its significant trade deficits in services with the United States. That would be the wise and prudent thing to do. Possibility 2, China will likely launch an economic subsidy for its economy in the form of further easing in financial conditions to offset any potential trade drag. Possibility 3, China could unleash differential treatment of local enterprises, as some have suggested. Beijing could simply opt not only its not apply its market access liberalization policy that they recently announced. Possibility 4, China could also choose a diplomatic retaliation and order Kim Jong-un to scuttle the recent agreement North Korea signed with the U.S., humiliating Trump by showing that it was Beijing all along who made the U.S.-North Korea summit possible and successful. Possibility 5, China could pick an aggressive route, and instead of a mild appreciation, it could aggressively pursue a weaker yuan to boost trade competitiveness with, which is ironically is the catalyst behind much of the Trump administration's animosity toward China. Possibility 6, China could pick the nuclear option and gradually, or worse, suddenly liquidate its treasury holdings. And this is a long-running worry by markets given China's holding of $1.2 trillion in treasury holdings. That is a potent threat given the fact that Russia just dumped half of their U.S. treasuries. And a lot of countries are dumping their U.S. treasuries. Where are they going? Well, I'm sure over at the Federal Reserve, they're just creating money out of thin air and they're buying back those treasury bonds. The only problem with that is increasing the total supply of U.S. dollars in circulation. That is inflationary, and they're not going to be able to keep that under wraps for very much longer, not when you're talking $1 trillion a pop. Story out of Zero Hedge. Canada, prepare for a bloody trade war. And again, we're getting into a series of escalations. Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian products. Justin Trudeau has now retaliated, and their economy took a hit. Everybody is just being thrown by this. Paul Tudor Jones is out there saying that the next recession will be frightening. And apparently, Lloyd Blankfein is getting ready to step down as CEO of Goldman Sachs. But apparently, he's actually moonlighting as a talk show host. Welcome to the club. But he was interviewing hedge fund investing legend Paul Tudor Jones, who says there is a recession coming. And in fact, this trade war with China, with Canada, with Europe, could just put us over the edge into the recession right now. A lot of people still talking about the pension problem over at Mauld in Economics. There's an article, "The Pension Train Has No Seat Belts." You know, everybody's talking about train wreck this and train wreck that, and the pension crisis is a train wreck about to happen. And there are no seat belts, and the people who get slammed in this are going to be in serious, serious hurt, because these are people who over their entire working life have paid into the pension plans. The pensions were unfortunately defunded for the most part during that 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud. Nobody has the gonadal presence to point the finger of blame at the Wall Street money junkies. And so now it's, oh, we can't make the pension payments we promise you. You're going to have to learn to live on less. In some states, they've literally changed the law to allow the pensions to basically renege on the promised payments. And once again, the money junkies get to keep their money, and the poor are going to be made to pay for all of this disaster. Having learned nothing from 2008, investors are apparently buying more junk-rated bonds backed by subprime auto loans. They didn't learn anything from the subprime mortgages. Why should they? The damage from that was also dumped on the American people with TARP and quantitative easing and bailout this and bailout that. Because that's the way the economy has worked in this country, going all the way back to the S&L meltdown. The rich get to keep their money, and the losses are transferred to the people. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And again, folks, yes, we absolutely rely on you to support Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com. There's a war on right now. And right now the weapon primarily is money. And the only way we're going to get the big money to stop corrupting our society is for the little money to all line up together in that common cause of restoring the Republic. So, if you would like to mail in a donation, the postal address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Road, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to call in and pledge to be a recurring subscriber, that is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours and extension 3 at all other times. Now, Fox News is now running the story, the update on Peter Strzok. Apparently, he's been escorted from the FBI building, but he's still employed. He still has his job. They just showed him the door for whatever reason. Now, he's working in human resources ever since he was kicked off of Mueller's team. So I think this may have something to do with his upcoming testimony before the Senate. And it may be somebody is throwing a tantrum. We don't know, but we're going to find on out. What's really interesting is we're starting to see more and more of the Democrats try and replay the old Russia card, saying, oh, you know, that person's actually working for, I think that person's working for Russia, and I think that person's working for Russia. Just trying to discredit them as they get closer and closer to just how crooked, not to mention inept, this FBI Department of Justice investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server, but not Hillary Clinton herself, was handled. Like I said earlier in the show, that's like investigating a gun, but not investigating the person who pulled the trigger. Does that make any sense at all? Now, getting back to the economic news, article out of Zero Hedge is talking about fiat currencies always end in collapse. Yes. There has never been a time in history where fiat currency lasted. Money comes in two forms. There's money with intrinsic, inherent value that everybody recognizes, whether it's cows, beads, seashells, all kinds of stuff. Silver coins, gold coins, obviously. Now, paper currency originally, when this country started, wasn't the money. It was a claim check for the money, which was the silver and gold coin. So we're in that position. The nation started with an honest monetary system, and we are back in the same predatory banking system that we fought the revolution to break free of, private central banking. Now, Russia and India are ditching the dollar in their military deals. India buys a lot of Russia's weapons, and they've been using the dollar. They're moving away from the dollar right now. and this is something like $2 billion in weapons deal between India and Russia, have been impacted as a result of the recent U.S. sanctions. The payments are getting stuck. And so Russia and India are saying, that's okay, we'll just use a different currency that the U.S. can't interfere with. So after several rounds of consultations, they have set up a rupee-ruble transfer pegged to the exchange rate of an international currency. And the foreign currency they're going to use as the benchmark is probably going to be the Singapore dollar, not the U.S. dollar. Over at Tesla, they're having more problems. As you know, they've been falling behind in production. And they had a fire a while ago that slowed them down. And now they've had another one. It apparently happened on Sunday night. And now Elon Musk is out there saying he thinks it's corporate sabotage. And they think they've identified who the saboteur might be. All he's saying is it's a he. Now, whether he's really the victim of corporate sabotage, which is not unknown in the United States, or whether he's just making excuses again, we don't know. But I can imagine he's got to be feeling the stress right now. And it really is a shame because, in theory, the cars are really good. They look really good. And I'm in agreement. The electric car is the wave of the future. There's no question about that. And once again, a reminder that back in 1995, Congress passed the Congressional Accountability Act, which directed the U.S. Treasury to make payments to victims of congressional sexual harassment, meaning you are footing the bill for these randy Congress critters' misbehavior in the halls of Congress. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to talk about immigration first in Europe, and then we're going to get on to this supposed controversy over the children at the border, which we now understand from this morning's IG hearing. It's being fanned up to distract America from what's being said in those hearings. Oh, it's the children. Feel bad for the children. All right, so Frontex, which is the European Union border agency, is warning there is a new mass wave of refugees coming to Europe via the eastern and western Mediterranean, and it's calling on transnational cooperation to try and halt it. They're talking about tens of thousands of migrants. The flood is still continuing out there, and they're starting to fly people back. Apparently, 14,000 individuals were flown back to their home countries from EU states in 2017 in 341 flights. And apparently, some of these people are trying to make it back to Europe. Of course, the situation is when you look at how many of the refugees there are, the cost of flying these people back home could bankrupt some of these national governments. It's a horrible place to be in. Now, over at the Alternative for Germany party, Alexander Goland is out there saying Germany is abolishing itself by allowing in all these refugees, because at some point down the road, the German people will be a minority in their own country. And that will be basically be the end of Germany as we've known it. Now, over a 4-year span, nearly 1,000 people have been injured or killed in terrorist attacks involving refugees, with Germany facing the highest number of terror plots. This according to a new Heritage Foundation report published yesterday. And data collected from the 194 terrorist plots detected across Europe point to a more than 1 in 3 chance Germany will be the country targeted in future terror schemes. So how's that open border thing working out for you? Greeks are starting to see a sudden 90% surge in asylum seekers across their land border with Turkey. Probably because Turkey built that other wall and They're just moving around here. And this is leading to even more tensions between Greece and Turkey. There had been a deal where Turkey was saying, we're not going to let them go any further. And there were supposed to be some concessions made on the other side. But apparently that deal has fallen apart. And that's probably why that watchdog organization is saying there is a huge flood of refugees on its way into Europe. Now, the other day we were talking about how Merkel is under tremendous pressure right now by the German parties who want to close the border. They're threatening to break up her coalition, which would basically kick her out of her job. They've given her 2 weeks to try and find a solution working with other European nations. So far, no good. It was all started, or it was sort of punctuated by this Iraqi murderer of a German teenager. And apparently, in his communications back to his relatives in Iraq, he said, everything is for free here. No working and a salary from the state. Well, gee, of course they're going to walk into a country where they're going to get free money, free things, and not have to work. And it's probably for this reason that Donald Trump is out there telling Angela Merkel that we don't want European-style immigration here. Because we're seeing what it's doing in Europe, and we're also seeing what it's doing in our country as well. So getting on to this controversy over the children, let me start out with a dose of common sense here. If you were to go, let's presume that you've got kids. If you were to go down to the local convenience store and rob it, and you got caught and arrested and thrown in prison, would the police put your kids in the prison with you? Of course not. It's a very dangerous place with all those other prisoners in there. For your children's own safety, they would not be allowed to go into prison with you. And that's exactly the situation we're dealing with here. These people coming across the border are breaking the law. They are being arrested and put in jail. But their children are not being put in prison with them for their own safety. This is not a deliberate policy of separating the kids from the parents. It is simply the way these things are done in any criminal case. You steal a car and you get arrested, you go to jail, they're not going to let your kids go with you. That's just the way it works. And this policy's been around for a very, very long time. So that's really what's going on down at the border. They're not being cruel. They're not torturing the kids. The facilities are not good, but again, the blame for all of this rests on the head of those people who step across that border with their children without permission. Now, the Democrats never cared about the immigration detention centers when Obama was president. In fact, it was all being kind of hushed up, not a big deal. Suddenly, it's a manufactured crisis for political gain. And what they're using it for, again, we saw this morning on the IG hearings in the Senate, it's a distraction. Pay no attention to the Hillary Clinton email investigation, which didn't investigate Hillary Clinton. We've got children, we've got illegal immigrants. And you need to understand, Trump had nothing to do with this. They're trying to blame him for it. But all the way back in 2014, President Barack Obama asked Congress for $3.7 billion to handle the thousands of child migrants on the southern border. So that's where it goes back to. These people are committing a crime by stepping across the border. They're being arrested. They're being put in jail. And no, their children are not allowed to go with them out of safety. The Democrats, of course, are claiming that the illegal immigrant children are held captive and tortured in the camps. I mean, they've actually used that word. Now, the camps are not very pleasant places to be at. But again, whose fault is that? The fault of the parents. If you don't want families separated, close that border. Don't let them in here in the first place. If they come up to that border and either a combination of the wall or armed troops or crocodiles in the Rio Grande, they decide to turn around and go back home, they're not going to be separated from their children. That's the solution. This idea of just allowing them to come on in and then spending vast sums of money to imprison the adults and care for the kids is not a good way to handle it. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Don in the Philippines, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, the really interesting hearing is going to be when they get struck. When they get struck, and I mean, he can't possibly have any really good answers for all the questions they're going to hurl at him, you know.
Yeah, I imagine he's going to get up there and they're going to ask him about that. We'll stop him coming. He's going to say, I was just kidding. I was just trying to impress the girl, you know, get her in the sack or something. I didn't really mean it. He's going to use the Hillary defense.
Yeah, he doesn't have the clout that Hillary has. He's just an FBI guy there, and I think what happened was earlier, about a week ago, his lawyer said he will testify. He will not take the fifth. He doesn't have to be subpoenaed. I think that was probably a ploy that he was trying to keep his job. And apparently it didn't work, I guess, if they escorted him out of the place.
Well, we don't know yet. He was escorted out, but apparently he's still employed. They have not actually fired him. They've just sent him home. And maybe that's because...
Well, they should fire him. Then why are they paying him if he can't do any work? It's crazy. And,
well, he was working in human resources.
Well, that's the whole thing. Human resources is the problem. They've all the time Obama was in there, they apparently made a concerted effort to hire people that liked Obama and liked the Democrats. And that's who they hired. That's why they got all these people in FBI, like Strzok. I mean, he probably always was some kind of a. I mean, I don't know what we'll find out. But probably when they grill him, they'll say, well, how the hell did you get this way where you hated Trump so much? Why? But another thing that came up, Sheila Jackson-Lee said that claims that they already have plans to fire Rosenstein.
Okay.
Get that one? It was on, while the man's name, Jim Jett something from North Carolina, the representative, when he was questioning Horowitz, and she had they let her have a little time there for a little in the middle of that, and she said she claims that they've already planned to fire. I mean, I don't know how she would actually get this information. She says they plan to fire Rosenstein on Friday, which they should have fired him a year ago. And I think Trump. Hopefully, what's going to play out is. Because we're sitting here wondering, how can Trump not do anything all this time? Well, maybe he's smarter than it looks, and he's just letting them, because they have nowhere to go with all this stuff, and they'll just, in the long run, they're just making themselves look like fools to try to find, unless they get, even if they get a Manafort to flip and make up some stuff about Trump, and that's not going to happen. I mean, Trump knows, I think he actually kind of somewhere deep down knows what he's doing, and what they had this thing in the game of poker called the slow roll, where you have the winning hand, but I don't play poker anymore. I don't drink, smoke, or gamble, Mike, for what that's worth.
Okay.
But, the slow roll is when you have the winning hand, but you're real slow in turning your hand over, because your opponent, and that way it hurts the opponent that much worse when you turn it over. Okay, I'll let you go, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot for that. I'm surprised that Trump really is maintaining such a low profile, because with this IG report, he's now operating from a position of strength. There is no question that James Comey deserved to be fired, and that Trump was correct to fire him. It wasn't obstruction of justice. And it may be that Trump, or at least his advisors, are saying, just let this play on out. because we're seeing the liberal Democrats continue to throw tantrums and scream and cry. And we are seeing, again, more and more revelations about what was going on. And apparently, again, Amanda Renteria exchanged highly classified info with Loretta Lynch. And apparently another thing that came out in the IG hearings today is that Hillary Clinton's lawyers deleted whatever emails they wanted from her server before it was turned in. So that's a major, major revelation. Speaking of Hillary and getting on back to the situation at the border, Hillary is now fundraising off the border humanitarian crisis. Hillary Clinton is very concerned about what's happening on the southern border, and despite not being a candidate for anything, at least yet, she wants Americans to give her money so she can do something about the crisis with those poor kids. And she just sent out a fundraising email to supporters asking them to donate to her organization so it can exploit the humanitarian crisis she says is being created by Trump's immigration policies, forgetting that it's actually Obama's immigration policies. Now, Hillary Clinton back in 2014 had a different view. Just because your child gets across the border, that doesn't mean your child gets to stay. And of course, the issue is, where will the money really go? Because to judge what happened when the Clinton Foundation was fundraising for Haiti, they raised a huge amount of money, and very little of it actually got down there to Haiti. Hillary's also out there saying that separating families is contrary to religious values. Jesus did not say, let the children suffer. And I have to wonder how many children in Yugoslavia and Libya and so on did Hillary separate from their families permanently, as in dead and blown to bits. So it's definitely crocodile tears. And she's going to run another scam. Even with all the scrutiny on her right now, she's going to run another scam. Fox and Friends host Brian Kilmeade basically said that these kids are not all innocents. We reported on yesterday where a lot of them are being used as drug mules to bring illegal drugs across the border. And between the time they actually cross the border and they get picked up by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the drug dealers get the drugs from them. But Brian Kilmeade is out there saying the problem with all these immigrant kids who are basically without their parents and without guidance, a lot of them are turning into MS-13, and that is a major, major problem. MS-13 is an incredibly violent gang. They make the Yakuza look like T-boys, and they're growing, and they're recruiting. And it's very, very dangerous. Now, somebody made an interesting observation looking at all these kids who are in these holding centers. They were asking, where are the girls? And apparently somebody was asking the Department of Homeland Security, where are the immigrant girls being kept? And there seems to be a bit of silence on that. Now, it may be that the daughters are not being brought along on the journey north. And it may be that the girls are in a condition in wherever they're being held that they don't want the media to see, because Health and Human Services and Department of Homeland Security are trying to downplay the hardships of these immigrant kids. But again, the fault for all of this rests on the parents who stepped across that border knowing they were going to be arrested and separated from their children. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Pat Buchanan has an observation to make here. Where many Americans see illegal intruders, Democrats see future voters. And what's really interesting is former First Lady Laura Bush is out there denouncing what is being claimed to be the Trump immigration policies. It's cruel, it's immoral, and it breaks my heart. But Trump didn't start this. This is the way this has been going on all the way back to the Obama administration. They're just trying to fan it up to damage him politically and try and rally the illegal immigrant vote for the November midterms. Which is why, if Congress is not willing to pass a national voter ID law, then the illegal immigrants are going to start swaying our elections. They're already being strategically placed in red states to just tip them over the line into being blue. And the GOP better be paying attention to what's going on while they still have the majority in the House and Senate. Donald Trump basically came out with the same thing, that the Democrats aren't really interested in the welfare of these children or the illegal immigrants. They just want to know how many of them can be used to vote the elections their way. And of course, you have the liberals out there saying, well, these people deserve asylum. They're fleeing persecution in their own home just because they had a different political opinion. Well, how about people like Jeremy Bedford Turner, who's in jail for saying that there's an inordinate Jewish control in Great Britain? Doesn't he deserve asylum from persecution due to his political opinion? Or how about Holocaust questioners Monica Schaefer and Ursula Haverback, both currently in jail in Europe? They're being persecuted for their political beliefs. Don't they deserve asylum? Catholic Bishop Richard Williamson, same thing, in jail for his political view. Doubts that the gas chambers actually exist. Why are these people not being given asylum? These are people with skills. Okay, over in Slovakia, politicians explaining how the words Soros and NGO are now considered dirty words. And all over Europe, people are waking up and realizing that this epic disaster they're suffering through is really the work of these globalists, led chiefly by George Soros and implemented with all of his non-governmental organizations. And they're having to live with the consequences of what Soros is doing. Soros doesn't. He's got his estates all over the place. He's got a beautiful place on the east coast of the United States. Lives in the finest hotels. He doesn't have to deal with the reality of the refugees on the streets. The people of Europe do. And they're getting very, very angry. We're seeing more and more as elections unfold across Europe. We're seeing the Eurosceptics just slide on in. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 3. Now, one of the things Donald Trump did campaign on, and it appears that he's actually working forward on that particular promise, was to combat human trafficking. And this wasn't as hot an issue as it might have been, because nobody really knows what the true scale of the problem is. Obviously, those people engaged in human trafficking, especially for sexual purposes, they don't want to be seen. And so getting actual numbers is going to be very, very difficult. But President Trump has signed McCall's bill, Michael McCall's bill, to combat human trafficking was signed into law. And the bill helps protect victims of human trafficking by providing the right tools to federal, state, and local law enforcement, as well as private sector organizations, to increase awareness and help stop this heinous threat. And Trump is also moving to freeze the assets of known human traffickers. In fact, he signed an executive order back in December of last year, which blocks the property and assets of persons involved in serious human rights abuses and corruption. So, a little bit of good news off of that. Up in Wisconsin, there is an Israeli woman. She's now a U.S. legal permanent resident, but she came from Israel, Wahiba Issa Deis, and she's living in Cudahy, Wisconsin. She's been charged in a criminal complaint with attempting to provide material support or resources to the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, otherwise known as ISIS, a designated foreign terrorist organization. Now, what would a woman from Israel be trying to support IRIS for? Can you say false flag? I knew you could. All right, let's take a phone call. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, there really is a lot of bloodthirsty overlordship going on the planet.
Yes.
Seems like the cream has not risen to the top. And
well, actually, if you think of politics as a giant septic tank, then you understand the mechanism by which the elites become elites.
The mechanism of what floats to the top.
Yeah, the big chunks float to the top.
You know, we have to have tolerance for anybody coming up with a crazy theories that maybe there's some sort of other than human type of domination on the planet, because they'd be forgiven for thinking something crazy like that. Because honestly, if you take a step back and you really look at what's going on, is humankind is being so abused. It's hard to imagine that any human would want to do this to us. Like, for example, you know, the dumping the toxic waste into the oceans. That's just on its face such a bad idea. It seems like nobody that lives on the planet would just want to do that.
Yeah, the problem is you're assuming that everybody else on planet Earth, every other human being, has your sensibility, your ethics, your morality, and that is simply not true. There are human beings who are total sociopaths, where they're just in love with themselves. They want money, they want power, they're ruthless, they'll do anything to get it, and they are literally psychologically unable to feel the damage they're doing to others around them. It's like blindness. They lack the necessary wiring in the brain to understand that what they do is causing pain to people around them.
Yeah, and there's all these like crazy theories, like, you know, someone very strongly religious might say, oh, this person is being influenced by the devil, is obsessed or something. You know, I can understand you might go there. I know it sounds crazy, but yeah, it does seem like no normal human would want to do that kind of stuff. Or, you know, you got David Icke's theories. But regardless, it's shocking the bloodthirsty cruelty that's dominating everything.
Yes.
And one thing I was thinking is that we're not protesting enough. Like, I liked your story yesterday. What country was it that was protesting because their elections were getting messed with?
That was down in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, and by the way, you made me laugh the way you said it. You said, well, they take their democracy serious down there in New Guinea. Yeah, it was funny, but it's very true. And why are we not taking our democracy more seriously? Like, honestly, I'm the kind of person, I would love to join some protests. Like, I would definitely take the day off of work and go down and protest if there was something happening. And, like, what... Like, the government is going to get away with whatever we let them get away with, obviously. And, you know, like our local government, we elected Trudeau partially was, oh, we're not going to raise electricity costs and we're going to stop this two-tier system, which costs a huge amount of extra money for every household as soon as you go over a certain amount. And now it's not happening and we're not complaining. So, like, I would love to be joining this protest. Like, why... In the past, we used to be fierce. Like, think of the way that America, you know, the colonists stood up against the British crown. Like, that was amazing and courageous. And, you know, Canada, we weren't a bunch of wussies back then. We were frontiersmen also, you know.
Well, I think you misunderstand what's going on here. I mean, certainly back when the Iraq War was cranking up, there were a lot of protests out in the street. They were being sabotaged by agent provocateurs so the police could come in with the tear gas and everything. And after a while, people began to realize that the protests were not having an effect because the government just didn't care. But the activism is still out there. It's just gone virtual. And whereas we used to march down the streets of, well, in my case, Honolulu, with a sign and get our message out to a few hundred people, today our activism is online where we get the same message out to thousands of people. So it's there. It's a little hard to see. It doesn't have the visuals that street protests do, but it's still going on.
It feels like it's not enough.
Well, it's all, it's all we've got. It's what we've got to work with, and we just keep pushing as hard as we can.
So why can't we just go down and surround our local city hall in our local town or city peacefully? Just, you know, if you go 400 or 500 of us and say, how dare you get elected saying the electricity prices won't go up, and put them up? Who do you think we are, suckers? You would put that back right now, you bastard. You know, that would solve all these small local issues. That people would respond to that. And in the past, we would have done that. In the
well,
past,
you're free to do it again. The question is are the politicians going to listen to you? And the fact of the matter is that in an age of massive election fraud all over the world, they don't have to listen to you anymore. I mean, they'll come up and they'll take your donations for the campaign, and they'll say what they think you want to hear. But in the end, protests worked before when I was a kid because the elections, while not totally 100% honest, were mostly so. And so every politician who was looking out that window at a protest sign saying, we don't agree with what you did, they realized that was a vote against them, and they would pay attention. Today, the elections are won by whoever's got the best election riggers. Hillary thought she had them in 2016, was a little disappointed. And so these days, the politicians, they shrug their shoulder. So what if you don't like the new electricity prices? You know, there's nothing you can do about it because my reelection is already locked in.
Well, yeah, that's true to a certain degree. That's true. But at the same time, with these current hearings that are going on right now, like you just said, they're going through the motions. They don't really want effective change. They're just going through the motions because it looks good. So the politicians do actually care about perception and political correctness and how all of us mob mentality regard them. So if we were all to just make it more clear that we're not okay with everything.
Feel free to do so. Feel free to do so. You know, I'm not stopping you.
Well, what's the difference? How did these things get started in the past? Like, how did you get huge protests in the past, and why aren't they happening now? Like, how do they get started?
Well, again, from my experience, is that you had to be someplace where there were a lot of people who might share your opinion. And most of these protests, certainly during the Vietnam era, originated on the college campuses, where there were groups that would gravitate together. And they would put up a sign saying, we're talking about, you know, a protest against the war in Vietnam. Kids would come on over, along with the usual number of undercover FBI informants, and they'd organize a protest. And unfortunately, another thing that we have lost in this digital age is the town square, where people would meet, or the quad, as they would call it on the college campus. So I would have to say that what you would need to do is build a mailing list of people that you think might agree with you and solicit a protest online. But the nature of our interpersonal relations and communications has changed. And again, I think the activism has moved into the virtual world. But, you know, if you can pull together some people and have a protest, it has been done. We have seen some protests that were organized online. Using very popular websites and saying, this is what we want to do.
It seems like the desire to protest is less, and it feels like we've been kind of conditioned to somehow not get organized in that way.
No. What we've been conditioned to understand is the politicians aren't paying attention any longer because the elections are rigged.
Okay, fair enough. And I just want to ask a question one more time. I've been hearing that Russia invaded Poland in 1939 in the form of a conquest. Is that propaganda against Russia, or did Russia? Are you familiar with that? Did Russia make some deal with Hitler in 1939 to just conquest, take over Poland, and maybe carve up Poland and split them, and then Germany violated that? And is that true?
I would have to go back and research it. I don't actually know that aspect of World War II history.
Because Russia says that's not true, and then all of the West and all the textbooks are saying it is true. And I'm at the point now where I don't believe any propaganda against Russia. It all feels like propaganda now. Anyways,
yeah, we're drowning in propaganda. And don't forget, the textbooks are written by the victors in the wars.
That's why I asked you. Maybe you have a fresher idea than what these textbooks are saying. Because you're more
like I said, I have not studied that particular aspect of World War II. You know, I'm kind of trying to stay with the here and now and things that we need to deal with right now today.
That's right. Okay. Keep up the good work. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. Well, as you know, we're finally into summer. Summer travel season is here, and you can always tell because the gas prices go up. TSA is saying come early and be prepared. Because apparently the intrusive searches by TSA are going to get more intrusive than they were last summer. And that will include potentially unpacking your suitcase at the security checkpoint. So they're just digging on in. Ron Paul actually came out with this comment about why can't we sue TSA for assault? Because that's what it is. When they're physically grabbing you, grabbing delicate parts of your body, that legally does meet the definition of assault. Now, there's an interesting little article over here. Oh, and by the way, apparently TSA is now maintaining a database of people who are not happy with being groped by TSA. And if you get on that list, they'll just grope you all that much more. Article out of Zero Hedge, and it's basically taking political correctness to task for having come to basically turn dialogue and discussion into this game of just being so obsessed with not saying something that is deemed to be wrong, and you're more focused on how you're saying it rather than what you're saying it. The content is being subordinated by this constant awareness that certain words have to apply, certain gender pronouns have to apply. And it's a form of identity politics. I'm PC. That's my identity. And political correctness only allows for a narrow range of expressed opinions on identity politics. Political correctness is literally the thought police, right out of George Orwell's 1984. And if human relations are about power, then exercising power over others is all that matters. The key to identity politics is all about coercion, making others do your will by threat of force and force itself. And these days, the main threat is depriving the heretics and apostates, that's us, of their livelihood. Like I said, the liberal Democrats can't actually win any debate on the facts and logic. So they scream profanity like Kathy Gifford or Robert De Niro or the other one. And then they try and find ways to filter the online discussion so that only the liberal Democrat point of view reaches the majority of people. That's what they're doing over at Google and Facebook and Twitter. Now, interestingly enough, down at the Southern Poverty Law Center, they've had a little bit of a whoopsie. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center is really not about law, and it's not about poverty. It is mostly a propaganda organization that declares as hate organizations or white supremacists anybody who is outside the official narrative. I've been in their crosshairs myself. But apparently they've taken a major blow to their credibility because they've had to settle out of court, rather actually in court, millions of dollars to an organization that they included on their list of extremists. And Southern Poverty Law Center President Richard Cohen issued an apology and agreed to pay $3.3 million to the British-based Killam Foundation and its founder Majid Nawaz after they appeared in a since deleted 2016 journalist's Guide to Anti-Muslim Extremists. And Mr. Nawaz threatened to sue. And as a result, people are saying it might not be a good idea to rely on the Southern Poverty Law Center for their hate group assessments. It's a smear job is really what it is. All right, we're going to take a phone call. James in Charlotte, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, Mike? I don't know if you discussed this at all. I joined the program late today, but I just want to let you know something that is just really shocking and upsetting to anyone that has any sense of justice. Did you know that they have now slapped Paul Manafort into solitary confinement?
I was not aware he was in solitary confinement. I know that the judge threw him in jail, but I can't. I don't know why they would put him in solitary confinement unless there's somebody they don't want him to talk to. I mean, solitary confinement is torture. It's normally used on prisoners who are like violent, and Paul Manafort does not strike me as the kind of person who's going to be violent or stupid enough to be violent, given that circumstance. How long are they going to keep him in there?
I don't know. They're trying to break him. I mean,
Yes.
That's all. I mean, they've got a judge that will just give Mueller anything he asks for.
Yes.
I mean, if they wanted to put him into Gitmo, I assume that the judge would okay that. I mean, it's just unbelievable what they're doing. I mean, they've gone back 17 years to find a charge to charge him with, and now imposing cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah, they're trying to break him. They're trying to break him and get him to roll on Trump, possibly lie on Trump. By the way, this judge is a Clinton donor. And is the same judge that let her off the hook for Benghazi. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, James, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, Fox News is reporting that former Trump lawyer John Dowd is saying that Manafort is being held in solitary confinement, which is in quote marks, because the warden feels there is somebody in the general prison population who might attack Paul Manafort just to get his name in the newspaper. Now, most prisons, along with solitary confinement, they do have what is called the PC section, which is protective custody, which are isolated cells away from the general population, but they're not solitary confinement. There are barred windows, there are lights, and all kinds of other facilities. Solitary confinement is basically a closet with a bucket and no light. So I'm not sure exactly what his situation is, but if he's in solitary confinement, then they're trying to break him, and this is just a cover story. So we'll see what happens with that one. Okay, now, we've talked before about the amazing disparity between the cost of healthcare in this country and its actual quality. And over at Blacklisted News, they have this study from the Commonwealth Fund, and it evaluated the top 11 developed nations for quality of health care, and the United States came in dead last. And the U.S. healthcare system is in dire need of a makeover. It needs to be repurposed back to being a health care system rather than just another get-rich-quick scam, pushing pills, pushing treatments. You know, here, little boy, have a vaccination against cervical cancer. Never mind that you don't actually have a cervix. Just take the shot here. Now, interestingly enough, there is an article out by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is still out there trying to do his vaccine crusade, but apparently is getting no support from Trump. And he's got this article out there saying how Slate, Salon, the Huffington Post, and the Daily Beast are all lying to their readers to protect vaccine industry interests. And he is saying that much of the so-called positive research out there suggesting that all vaccines are completely safe and effective is inherently flawed, unreliable, or flat out falsified. This, according to an investigative report conducted by Slate, has revealed. But many mainstream outlets like Salon and the Huffington Post and the Daily Beast and even Slate itself are notorious for covering up this truth as they blatantly lie to readers about the merits of vaccines. That's because the whole lot of cash flowing between big pharma and these corporate media outlets, which are essentially bribed into blocking publication of all independent research that depicts anything negative about vaccines. And even though this information might help parents make smarter and more informed decisions about vaccines for their children, decisions that might save them from harm, the corporate media is still censoring it. They want those vaccination rates at the highest possible levels. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. And that's why I'm thinking this big scary story coming out of China about disease X. That's clearly a name designed to strike fear into the heart of the reader or the listener. This is coming from the World Health Organization. And they know what it is. It's not a mystery. It's the N9, N7. It's a variant of the bird flu. It's not a mystery, but they call it disease X, and it's coming to get you unless you buy a lot of vaccinations. Okay, back in 2014, a gentleman named Dwayne Johnson, he's a groundsman, professional groundskeeper, was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer that starts in the white blood cells. And he is convinced that the weed killer Roundup is what caused the cancer, and he is the first person to take its maker, Monsanto, to trial. Now, the chemical glyphosate is the main ingredient of Roundup, and it has been listed by the World Health Organization and California as cancer-causing. Now, Monsanto is out there saying that they've paid for more than 800 studies that have established Roundup's safety. But we know science is for sale. Unfortunately, in this country, pretty much everything is for sale these days. I still remember that presentation that was being given by a Monsanto representative who was saying, glyphosate is as safe for humans to drink as water. Somebody walks up and said, this is a glass of glyphosate, help yourself. And he said, I'm no fool, and just walked off the stage. They know. They know their products are dangerous. Monsanto won't even serve GMO food in their own company canteen. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. So stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're just now getting word that Israel has launched another bombing mission into Gaza, this one in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, down by the Rafah crossing. Israel insists that they're just bombing Hamas. But of course, with that population tightly packed in, obviously a lot of non-combatant civilians are going to be killed and injured as well. But this is Israel being Israel again here. Okay, now, a very historically knowledgeable listener wrote on in to clarify the issue about Poland. And the email said, the accepted history is World War II began when Germany invaded Poland in 1939. That was a result of that whole Gleiwitz affair, false flag. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Hitler and Stalin, Germany, and the USSR contained a secret annex about spheres of influence, basically dividing up Poland, the Baltic states, and Moldova, Bessarabia. Originally, Poland and Lithuania went to Nazi Germany. The final version gave Lithuania to the Soviet Union, and lots of territory claimed by Poland, Belarusia, and Ukraine also went to the Soviet Union. So that's basically what happened with Russia and Poland all the way back then. There is yet another controversy stirring up in athletics. This is not the one about boys who think they're girls competing against the girls and winning. This one is a little bit, well, it's intrusive. And apparently there is this female athlete, Caster Semenya, who is filing a legal challenge against the IAAF regulation that requires women who compete in athletics at the international level to submit to medically unnecessary intervention to lower their natural testosterone levels. Now, yes, women do have testosterone, and yes, some women do have more of it. And it will do to them what it does to us guys. And so now we're getting into this PC situation where the women with less testosterone are saying, it's not fair. We've got to level the playing field. Those women who were born with more testosterone, you've got to crank it down. And it really is rather ridiculous. And the reality is, and I know the liberals are going to hate me for this, some people are born with gifts that are different. Some people are born smarter. Some people are born better looking. Some people are born more athletic. We are not all cookie cutter identical, and no amount of political correct nonsense is going to make it that way. We're all unique individuals, a product of what we inherit from our ancestors, coupled with our experience growing up in the world. And we are all unique individuals. And we shouldn't be penalized or punished for being a unique individual. Meanwhile, over at Northeastern University, there is a professor, Susanna Danuta Walters, and she also teaches sociology at NU. She's running a class at Northeastern University, Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies program. And she wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post that calls on all men everywhere to step away from pretty much every position of power in society in order to pacify the demands of feminist women like herself who hate men. And she's basically couching her blatant sexism as inclusivity and equality, saying that all women have an inherent right to hate all men because of the millennia of woe that men, all of them, have apparently inflicted upon all women since the beginning of time. Little collective guilt going on there. So here she is being completely sexist and insisting that it represents empowerment. And it just tells you how our educational institutions have just become these bastions of fanatical liberal thought. And I'm sorry, but if you're sending your daughter to this Northeastern University and she's taking women's gender and sexuality studies along with sociology from this person, how's that going to help her get a decent paying job to pay back those student loans? A little more insanity from the political correct rule. As you know, the PCers are constantly shifting the definition of what constitutes harassment. And it used to be inappropriate touching or suggestive comments. Now it's merely looking at somebody. And apparently, Netflix has imposed a rule in the workplace. If you look at a coworker for more than 5 seconds, it's considered harassment. So I guess Netflix is adding staff that just go around with stopwatches, making sure that people aren't looking at each other for more than 5 seconds. That is completely ridiculous. How's anybody supposed to have a conversation if they can't look at each other for more than 5 seconds? It really is getting ridiculous. It's becoming a caricature of itself. And I'm not surprised that we're seeing pushback now. All right, let's get into talking about computers and so forth. Little article coming out of the week talking about the government's creepy obsession with your face. And you have all these agencies, the Department of Homeland Security, police departments, are jumping on the facial recognition bandwagon, even though the technology does not appear to be mature. Gets a lot of false positives. Apple is having problems with that Face ID on the iPhone 10. But apparently, Department of Homeland Security is developing a massive new biometric and biographic database with extensive data on citizens and foreigners alike. And this new system called HEART will include at least 7 biometric identifiers, including face and voice data, tattoos, DNA, scars, and other physical descriptors on as many as 500 million people. Now, obviously, we should be very concerned on their grabbing our DNA. I hope they're using a swab and not a needle. Out in California, finally a little common sense. A judge has ruled that Twitter can be sued for falsely advertising they allow free speech. And the judge said that Twitter's policy of banning users at any time for any reason or for no reason constitutes an unconscionable contract for the company which advertises free speech. Now, Twitter tried to dismiss the lawsuit from Jared Taylor, who was banned by the platform in December of last year. And Taylor is a self-described white activist, and the judge says he may proceed with his lawsuit against Twitter because the social media company falsely advertises free speech, yet bans users for any and no reason. The judge also ruled Twitter could be sued on the basis of misleading its users due to the platform's promise not to ban accounts on the basis of viewpoints or political affiliation, which they, in point of fact, regularly do. So that's how we get back at social media for filtering us, for banning conservatives. We sue them for false advertising. We go after their public image. Now, as you know, a while back, there was a former CIA employee, Joshua Adam Schultz, and he is thought to have been the source between WikiLeaks' exposure of the CIA's hacking arsenal. And apparently he left the agency in late 2016, but he's accused of having stolen classified materials from its computer network and then turning them over to WikiLeaks. And he's now been formally charged for the hack and the leak. And they threw on a child porn charge as well, which may just be to make him seem less sympathetic in the eyes of the public. But if he's convicted on all counts, he faces 135 years in prison. Down in Brazil, a Brazilian judge has ordered Facebook to remove all current posts that offend the, quote, image, honor, and privacy, end quote, of slain politician Marielle Franco and all future posts of the same nature. This could set a dangerous precedent for freedom of speech online in the country or anywhere. But Facebook has now assumed censorship powers in Brazil, courtesy of the courts. So let's take a phone call here. Mark in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. I was doing some quick research on Ben Swan. That's 2 N's on Swan.
Yes.
I guess you're familiar. and Wikipedia came up, and they said some things like, "Oh, and he there's this discredited thing about vaccines causing autism," and I'm like, "Yeah, according to who?" You know, it's like Zion is claiming the protocols of the learned elders of Zion has been discredited. And it's like, yeah, according to who? Well, well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the knife that exactly matches the fatal wound and has the defendant's fingerprints all over it. Well, that's been discredited. Excuse me. But basically, I tried to make some remedy about some things, like pointing out that I'm a signatory with Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth regarding certain things that Ben Swan said about not believing the official account regarding Building 7. And basically, when I tried to remedy some things about what was said about Ben Swan, they just completely wiped out everything that I said.
Yes.
You know, they went through and just completely wiped it. But does Wikipedia make any claims to allow free speech, or because they seem to be kind of you mentioned something the other day about how they were basically promoting the official narrative, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Wikipedia, it bills itself as the public encyclopedia that anybody can edit, but in point of fact, that is not true. And many, many years ago, Wikipedia had an article about me, as well as whatreallyhappened.com. And the articles were basically out there, you know, saying he's an anti-Semite, he's a Jew hater, blah, 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 blah. So I went on into the article and I made some corrections in the name of accuracy, saying, he's a critic of the government of Israel. And I come back the next day and all my changes were erased. So I went back in to change it again, and it was locked against me. And the reason that Wikipedia gave the excuse for locking me out of the article is that Michael Rivero is not considered an authoritative source on the subject of Michael Rivero. And I went public with that on my website. Wikipedia deleted both of the articles about whatreallyhappened.com and Michael Rivero, and that was basically the end of it. Now, for non-controversial subjects, Wikipedia is a good source of information. Yeah. But if there's anything that is controversial with the official story versus alternative view, Wikipedia is fully on board with the official source. And yes, they attack anybody who questions the government story about anything. They're attacking critics of vaccines. They're attacking those who question the safety of GMOs. Again, all of our large corporate social media has been co-opted and compromised and brought under the control of the dictatorship.
And now I was wondering about, there's one that's new to me because my brother just introduced, he mentioned it in passing. I checked it out. Quora, Quora.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with this or if
yes,
that's
I am.
new to you too, but I've had a kind of a back and forth where, what about this miraculous manner in which Israel defeated all their enemies? And I said it wasn't a miracle at all. They preemptively attacked all their neighbors, and there's this guy basically touting the official lie even after I pointed out to him that, that I've had repeated conversations with Phil Turney. Right? Actually, I didn't mention RBN in that context, but this RBN is where I've spoken with Phil Turney repeatedly, and all the survivors of the USS Liberty acknowledged that the attack on the Liberty was not an honest mistake. And he says, well, all 6 of these investigations have all concluded it was just a case of friendly fire. And I'm like, well, yeah, and Sirhan really did kill RFK because the official investigation said so. It's like, that's incredibly gullible to take any official investigation at face value.
Yes.
So, like I say, I've had some things to say about AJ too, and I think you would probably be in agreement that arrogant jerk, as I disaffectionately call that guy, who's, he started out good, but he turned into a Zionist shill, and I'm like, excuse me, I don't mind your having a personal stance of, being in favor of Israel, but I do mind your basically being part of maligning people like Christopher Bolin. And when I listen to Christopher Bolin in particular, I find that he says this individual, here's who they are, here's what they did. And no, I'm not making a blanket indictment of all Jews. That's completely wrong. I am saying here's these individuals who were part of the treason of 9/11, and you know, I'm not going to put up with anyone turning it into a broad brush that all Jews knew about it and were complicit. I guess you're familiar with Christopher Bolen, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I have yet to buy his books for the lack of means, but I intend to because he sounds like David Irving. Agree with him or disagree with him, you have to admit David Irving is thoroughly, meticulously researched in primary source documents. He's not going to secondary sources. So, you know, even if you disagree with him, don't go saying, well, he's a Holocaust denier. It's like, no, we're just skeptics based on looking at all of the available evidence. And we don't deny that something happened. We just deny that the official account is what it's made out to be. But the big problem is that when Israel uses the official account of the Holocaust to say that therefore whatever they do is justified, it's illegitimate to say that because evil was done to the Jews, therefore whatever Israel does is justified. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's about right. But of course, it's complete and utter nonsense because if you go back far enough in anybody's history, they've had terrible things done to them. My family was tortured by the Inquisition. Yeah. That doesn't give me the right to go on over and paint mustaches on the pictures of the popes.
I think that would be funny if you did. But, you know, you're right. Vandalism is not, even if that vandalism is relatively harmless like that.
Yes.
What do you do if they already have a mustache? Do you kind of erase it off? Or
yeah, just get a little white out on there.
Yeah, that's fine. But, you know, blessing to you. And like I say, we don't see eye to eye, but at least the thing I will always commended about you, like the chemtrail thing, you're civil and respectful in the way you go about presenting your opinion. And for that, I thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for the call. We got to let you go for a commercial break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. And the latest update on the volcano is it's doing pretty much exactly what it's been doing the last few days. The lava is still flowing from Fissure 8. It's still going down this path it's sort of created for itself. There was another explosive release at Kilauea Crater about 5 o'clock this morning. It's almost becoming regular like clockwork. That these things just puff up every once in a while. So nothing new and nothing dramatic, but it is still ongoing, no indication of where it's going to end. Now, getting into the world of computers and entertainment as well, a little bit of an embarrassment and possibly a huge amount of money at stake. Apparently, Disney and other major film studios are not able to dodge lawsuits claiming they used stolen technology to create the lifelike animated characters in top-grossing films like Beauty and the Beast, according to a federal judge. Now, U.S. District Judge John Tigar said it was plausible that the studios knew they were using stolen software and that they directly benefited from that use. So the judge refused to dismiss claims of vicarious and contributory copyright infringement. And the liability here could be very, very substantial. Now, the plaintiff is Reardon LLC, which developed a very sophisticated facial performance motion capture technology. See, back when I was doing this stuff like at Robert Abels, you took control points on the mesh and you moved them by hand. Then you had motion capture that caught the body, and more recently, facial capture, which has been used on a lot of movies. And if, in fact, the courts find for Reardon, then companies like Disney, 21st Century Fox, Paramount Pictures, video game maker Crystal Dynamics, and Digital Domain are all going to be in serious financial hurt. Because basically what's online is a percentage of the gross box office of the films that use that stolen technology. You got to be very, very careful about that. And as if that was not enough problems, Disney has had to issue a seizure warning about Incredibles 2 for fans with epilepsy. Apparently there's something in there that's blinking at 3 per second. And why that is not one of the first things that you're taught in computer animation school, I don't know. Because I've known about this problem, again, all the way back to Robert Abel and Associates. You cannot have anything flashing or oscillating on the screen at 3 per second, or you'll trip off anybody in the audience who's got epilepsy. And it seems like every 5 to 10 years, somebody makes the same mistake all over again. All right. Apparently over in northern Wisconsin, there's been a dam failure. Major storms overwhelmed the Radican Dam on the Tamarack River in Douglas County. Governor Walker has issued a state of emergency for that area. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Email, phone call, face-to-face. Don't bother with corporate social media. It is totally, totally co-opted and controlled right now. It's useless for the business of we, the people. Please spread the word about Republic Broadcasting, what really happened. Please donate. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.